Hello, good morning. A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Mark Dowdall. I am the Power and Water Editor here at MEED. I'm delighted you are taking the time to join us today for our MENA Power Projects Market 2026. Now, we're going to start in a couple of minutes. First, just want to point out a couple of things. We have the chat box on the right of your YouTube screen. If you have any questions, please send them in to me, and I will get answers to you at the end of the webinar or sometime during the session. Now, I'm really excited to know where everyone is tuning in from today. Obviously, we cover the MENA region, and this is based off our premium intelligence report, which I'll come on to a little bit more later on. Please tell me where you're all based today. I'm really interested to hear if you're right across the region or otherwise. I know we just did an Iraq projects webinar very recently, and we had people who tuned in right across the region. So please do let me know. I guess just a couple of things to point out. If you would like the slides for this webinar, you can click on the link below. You can also scan a QR code, and we'll get them to you later on. Arnold, good morning. Okay, we have someone in Kuwait. Very good. KSA, this is great. Good morning, all. Abu Dhabi, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and that's good. We have lots of project information, data, and analysis coming up in today's session. And we will be covering all of those countries that I've just mentioned. Someone else from KSA. Very good morning to you, UAE. So I do hope some of these projects, data analysis, insights will be valuable to you in terms of both expanding your presence in the region and potentially securing new contracts. Alok, good morning from Dubai. If I haven't already made it clear, we are conducting this webinar from Dubai. KSA, Nabil, very good morning to you. I think the other thing to point out is it's the 2nd of July today, so I think it's as good a time as any to kind of take stock of where the market is at this year. We have just turned the halfway point. The third quarter actually started yesterday, so I think it's a good time just before we go into the summer. I'm sure plenty of you are off on your holidays this summer. It's also, I guess the thing about the summer, it's also that time of year where electricity power grids are put under the most pressure. So it's certainly quite an interesting time of year for the sector. Zishan, thank you for joining. Morning from Dubai. This is great that you're all here again. If you have any questions, put them in the box and I'll get to them either during the session or at the end of the webinar. Now, also, I'd like to just say if you would like to follow the MEED LinkedIn page for future updates on future webinars. You can also follow MEED.com, subscribe to our email alerts, and we'll let you know when the next webinars are coming up. So I think I see some of you are still joining. I think it's time. Hello, Sarah from Distant Studio Consultancy, Abu Dhabi. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. I hope you will find this session useful. Okay, with that being said, I think we'll get started with the presentation. So the first thing, you can see the QR code is there again if you would like to scan it and get a copy of the slides afterwards. Just to point out, this session is being recorded, so it will be available again to look back on YouTube after this session is finished. So the first thing I would like to point out is this analysis it's based off a 630 page premium intelligence report on the power projects market 2026. So this obviously looks at the regulatory framework in the region. It looks at the pipeline of future projects and some of the issues that key stakeholders in the region are facing. So you can get this report for $4,000. And I hope today's webinar just gives you a little bit of a flavor of what's in this report, as many of the charts and the data we're using today is has been extracted from this report. So with that being said, let's take a look at the installed capacity. Now, I've split this presentation into 3 sections. So what I'll do first is take a look at a review of the installed capacity in the region. Then after that, I will go in and take a look at the middle section of the presentation. We will look at the market risks. Obviously, it's been quite an interesting year, and I think we can certainly say that it's a much more complex environment in many ways than this time last year. So I'll take a look at that. And then the third section of the presentation, I will look at the pipeline of future projects. Good to see people are still joining. We have Aaron. Thank you for joining, Aaron from UAE. We have Joaquin, great, someone from Spain. Yeah, obviously there's plenty of Spanish firms that have a big interest in this region. So I hope you do get some value from today's session. So to begin, the cumulative installed generation capacity of the 14 major countries has risen by 8.3% in the last 2 years. So Saudi Arabia has led this with the installed capacity of now it's over 100 gigawatts as of 2025, followed by Egypt in second place with 63 gigawatts, and then the UAE with 51.3 gigawatts of installed capacity. Now, interestingly, the UAE led capacity growth in this period from 2023 to 2025, mainly due to the completion of some major projects. So the first units of the Baraka nuclear power plant were completed. The Fujairah F3 IPP gas-fired plant was completed, and actually this entered commercial operations in October last year. And then there's obviously the Dubai Solar Park, which is, once completed, it will be the largest single-site solar complex in the world. So the 5th phase of this was completed. Interestingly, the 6th phase is now also nearing completion, and we expect this to be probably completed by the end of the summer. So in the next couple of months, it's getting very close to being completed, which is good news. So installed capacity, thanks for bringing that up, Alidar. So installed capacity is the projects that have already been commissioned, completed and commissioned in the region. Okay, so it's not the projects that are under execution, the projects that have been completed and commissioned in the region. Do we have a projection for the Syria power market? That's a good question. So Syria is one of those markets that's it's rebuilding its sector after many years of inactivity. It now has the Syria Emergency Electricity Plan. It's had limited contract activity in the last couple of years, but it's certainly, for the first time, it has started tendering projects again, which is good news. So while it isn't covered in this report, I think it's something that definitely might be looked at again now that tenders have started up. So just to look at again, the market overview, fossil fuel-fired plants accounted for 87% in 2025, while solar and wind accounted for a roughly 10.6% of total installed capacity. I think this time last year, that figure was about 89% for fossil fuels. So solar is, and this is a theme that we'll come to again during the presentation, solar is certainly catching up on installed capacity. So if we look at the top markets, we can see that Saudi Arabia and the UAE are leading along with Iraq and Egypt for total installed capacity. I think one of the things to look at is in terms of, let's say, Morocco and Egypt. We can see they're developing quite a diversified range of different generation capacity. UAE is, you'll see at the bottom of your chart, is also still the only country that has commercial nuclear energy, although Egypt is now developing the El Daba nuclear plant. So this can be expected to come online in the next couple of years. And obviously, of course, natural gas is still the backbone. So if you look at the pie charts there, natural gas is still really the backbone for much of the region's energy. It's a bridger fuel, and it's something which is very, very important in the energy transition moving forward. Now, we'll come on to the energy transition and a little bit more later in the presentation. I just want to start with our first poll question of the day. Which country is expected to record the fastest growth in installed power generation capacity by 2030? Now, remember, this is growth we're talking about. So it's not necessarily who has the most installed power generation capacity, but it's who is expected to grow the quickest. So I'll give you just a few seconds. You can put in your answers. So we have number one, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE, and Qatar. So all of these are projected to grow quite significantly over the next couple of years. Which of these is expected to record the fastest growth? And this leads us actually quite nicely to our next slide. Okay, I'll just give you a few more seconds. Okay, so if we zoom out and look at the growth over the next few years, we can see that Saudi Arabia, of course, will still have the most installed capacity by 2030. UAE will have 72 gigawatts. Egypt is going to grow quite significantly to 80.2 gigawatts. I think a couple of things that stand out for me here is, first of all, Iraq. So it's expected to grow quite significantly from 35.1 gigawatts in 2025 to 60.4 gigawatts. So I think the key takeaway here from this slide is really that while Saudi Arabia obviously will be leading in terms of new capacity, actually there's opportunities right across the market. So you can see from this that that the market is projected to grow quite broadly, even if we look at somewhere like Bahrain, for example, which as of 2025 had quite a small installed capacity. This is expected to double by 2030. So we really expect opportunities broadly based right across the market. And I think that's the main thing to take from this slide. And just to touch on the poll question, if you said Saudi Arabia, you would have been right. Obviously, Iraq is coming from a much lower base. Bahrain is on this chart. Bahrain is projected to actually go the quickest, but in terms of the poll question, Saudi Arabia is the correct answer. So maybe that was a little bit of a trick question, but moving on. So, and this is the last thing we'll look at now, just in terms of the demand growth. If you look at this chart, you can see that demand growth is expected to grow quite steadily over the next few years. So power consumption is expected to register or is expected to reach 1,336.5 terawatt hours in 2025 to 1,656.9 in 2030. So some of this is based, first of all, on population growth. People are still coming to the region despite geopolitical issues. We do expect the population to continue to grow in the region right through 2030. Obviously, climate change is one. We're having higher temperatures, which puts a bit more pressure on the grid and requires an increase in cooling requirements. Data centers obviously is a huge thing over the next 5 years. That's really going to drive consumption. So you can see in this chart that it's projected to grow quite steadily over the next few years. And so contract awards analysis. We will move on, and I will try and get to some of your questions a little bit later in the webinar. So here we're looking at contract awards over the last decade, okay, 2016 to 2026. So things have obviously changed quite a lot. Contract awards and projects have evolved. Power project contracts worth $315.7 billion have been awarded in that time. So annually, on average, in the MENA region, there's been awards of the value of $28.7 billion. Generation has consistently accounted for the majority of those awards, 68%, while transmission and distribution accounted for the remaining 32%. Now, if we look at the chart, we can see obviously there was quite a big spike in 2024. 2025 was another good year. 2026, it's a little bit lower this year. We'll speak a little bit more about that in a bit. In 2025, some 280 individual projects were awarded, reaching $66.9 billion. Unsurprisingly, Saudi Arabia accounted for 39% of these. This was obviously driven by the National Renewable Energy program that is ongoing. So last year you would have seen a lot of contracts awarded for round 6 of this program. In 2026, contracts considered awarded include the Tuila C combined cycled plant in Abu Dhabi. This was procured by IWIC. Oman, the 1600 megawatt Misfa IPP, and the 1.95 gigawatt Minya solar plus BESS project in Egypt. So it was actually a Norwegian firm called Scatec. They signed a PPA with the Egyptian electricity transmission company back in January for this project. BESS is something we'll return to a little bit later in the webinar, as this has been one of the big themes of the year, and it's definitely something that is very fast growing and very competitive, and we think this will be quite significant in the market moving forward. Now, again, just point out if you've any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will try and get to them when I can. I see something about the market risks. What I'll do is we're coming up to a slide, and we'll go through the risks in the market very shortly. Just to stay on contract awards for a second, 2016 to 26 transmission and distribution contract awards, they've tended to move in cycles. So these kind of awards often tend to move in cycles. So you might have a really strong year, which might be followed by maybe a slightly quieter year. But what we do see in this is that since probably coming out of COVID 2020, 2021, investment has certainly ramped up in this sector, and grid expansion and interconnection works are becoming critical to integrating renewables and meeting rising demand. And it's, I guess, as more power generation capacity comes on stream, it becomes even more important to have a stable grid that can handle all of these. So we certainly see this trend continuing in the next few years. Now, if we look specifically at the data from last year's awards, MENA clients and off-takers awarded over 215 billion worth of power generation contracts between 2016 and April 2026. Thermal plants accounted for the largest share, which they have done for the last number of years. But I think what's evident is that solar is fast catching up with this figure. I think even I touched on the Saudi Arabia renewable energy program. I think one key thing to point out, one interesting thing to point out, last year also saw a record number of investment in wind power projects in Saudi Arabia. So that's certainly a developing segment that had a bit of a breakthrough year. There's now $6 billion worth of wind power contracts in execution in Saudi Arabia alone. So we're definitely seeing this trend. Solar continues to grow. Oil and gas power plants, which has been a staple of the region over the last number of years, this will still be needed. There's no doubt about that as we continue with the energy transition. Just the sheer amount of power that will be needed. It's your traditional thermal plants will be still very important moving forward. I see someone else has joined us here. Mujahid, thank you for joining this webinar today. Welcome. Again, please feel free to put in the comments where you are joining us from. Obviously, we're covering the MENA region, so it's very interesting to know which part of the region you're joining us from. And just on that, just a reminder that these slides are available if you click the link. And also the webinar is being recorded. You can access this in your own time once we have finished today. So this is Power Contract Awards. And again, I guess it's 2025 H1 versus 2026 H1. As I said at the beginning of the webinar today, we've just turned at the midway point of the year, so it's quite a good time to take stock of where we're at. It's 2nd of July and the third quarter has just started. Why I'm looking at this is obviously it's been quite an interesting number of months. 2025 and 2026, the awards here basically look at pre and post conflict. We have someone joining from Jubail City. Obviously, there's a lot of work going on there. Thank you for joining. So if we look at these awards, okay, power contract awards have dropped by more than 50%. That's the first thing I'll say, but awards have remained broadly consistent for most sectors. So I think the first thing to point out here is that generally across all sectors, things are still doing relatively well. If you look at industrial, construction, gas, for example, in a lot of cases, awards are at least consistent with last year or even better. So generally, things are still doing quite well. Projects are progressing. Obviously, let's take a look at the power data. We can see that awards in the power market have been significantly less, more than half of what they were this time last year. Now, I think there's a couple of things to take into account. Last year was an extraordinarily high year by any standards. So in June, May, June last year, we had the PIF awards, which reached $8.3 billion, $8.3 billion. Okay, for renewable projects in Saudi Arabia. We also had the $6 billion Abu Dhabi Solar and BESS project, which was awarded last year. Okay, so Masdar is developing that, and actually that started construction back in October. So I think it's important to point that out. While at first glance, it seems quite a big drop in new contract activity in the power sector. It's not as bad as it looks, and this is something we'll monitor over the next number of months. But I think the bigger picture shows that awards across multi-sectors have generally been quite consistent. Now, this isn't to say that individual companies haven't faced their own cash flow problems or problems with rising supply chain costs, delays in the supply chain, but on a broad project basis, activity, albeit in some of the maybe large power projects, we've seen a little bit of a delay, maybe in the tendering side of things. Bidding extension deadlines. These have been pushed back a couple of months, but for the most part, the multi-industry project activity is still continuing. And here are some examples of the power generation contracts that are in execution. So as we said earlier, thermal power plants account for 49% of generation projects under execution. Obviously, the Abu Dhabi solar BESS project that we already mentioned, $6 billion. Larsen and Toubro Power China are carrying out the EPC works for this. There's also some quite big projects within the pipeline, but being executed in Kuwait right now. So the Al Zour North IWPP Phase 2 and Phase 3 project, power and water desalination plant. So a consortium of Aqua and Gulf Investments Corporation, they signed the developers contract for this in August last year. And the offtake agreement then was finalized at the beginning of this year. This will actually be Kuwait's largest power and water desalination plant once complete. Another interesting thing to point out from here, we can see two quite big projects in Iraq, which just goes to show the emphasis they are putting on new power generation. So the Al Khayrat thermal power plant, 2.8 gigawatts, and the Al Faw combined cycle gas plant in Iraq. So together, this will add almost 6 gigawatts of power generation capacity once these are complete. And Iraq has historically struggled at times in the really hot summer months with power blackouts, and there is it's forecasted to add a significant amount of power generation capacity over the next few years. And of course, on the transmission and distribution side of things, as I've mentioned earlier, so high voltage interconnection projects are really driving investment in the Middle East transmission infrastructure. So we can see the biggest one here, $5.3 billion, is the HVDC converter station. And this is providing a transmission link between Oman and Saudi Arabia. We have another person, Yasser. Welcome to the webinar. You're joining from Egypt. We have covered one or two projects in Egypt so far. There's certainly a lot of activity ongoing in that part of the world at the moment. On the power transmission and distribution contracts, so this Project Lightning, this is a transmission project that deals with subsea power cables, and this is based in the UAE. And then the Al Wafrat Al Faw, $819 million transmission line. This will improve connectivity, interconnectivity between Iraq and Kuwait. And you can also see there we've picked out the kind of main contractors for these projects. And again, just to remind you that you can get these slides. I know for some of you, it's interesting to know who is executing these projects. We can see Egypt's El Saudi is also executing projects in both Qatar for Karama and Abu Dhabi for TAQA transmission. And I'll just take a moment to touch on this premium intelligence report, which this webinar and data and charts from this webinar are based on. It costs $4,000, but it takes an in-depth look at the power market performance and capacity trends. It's over 600 pages long. So I think today's webinar gives you a flavor of what you can expect in the report. It looks at both generation and transmission projects, how the energy transition is going to take shape in the next few years, and provides lots of data and analysis. And we really think it's a valuable business tool for those looking to both expand their presence in the region and potentially secure new contracts. Which segments in the sector, I have a question here, are currently offering the biggest opportunities for suppliers? Well, in terms of project activity, we've already said that solar has been closing the gap on traditional thermal power generation. And we expect solar to continue this trend in the coming years. I just want to take this chance now to look at the power projects market top clients. So Saudi Arabia's SPPC and Iraq's Ministry of Electricity have the largest and second largest share of contracts or projects under execution. Okay, so in execution means the contract has been awarded and construction is either ongoing or it's expected to start very soon. The Ministry of Iraq Electricity, Iraq has signed several large-scale agreements towards the end of last year, and there are some big, certainly some big plans over the next couple of years. I think some questions remain over the delivery maybe of these projects, considering some of these are such large-scale projects. But certainly there is quite a high demand for these projects in Iraq, and there's quite a big pipeline, which we'll come on a little bit more to shortly. Some of the other top clients for contracts in execution, you can see there, obviously the public, the PIF in Saudi Arabia is currently executing quite a large chunk of renewable energy projects right now. Saudi Energy is very prominent, obviously, on the transmission side of things. So while I think on the transmission side of things, in terms of substations, overhead cables, the value of these projects tend to be a little bit lower, but the volume of projects is very high, and Saudi Energy, or formerly Saudi Electricity Company, are really driving these projects forward. EWEC in the UAE has reached several contracts in the last year. Already mentioned the Taweelah C combined cycle gas turbine plant. So it's an EWEC has quite a big pipeline of projects moving forward. Now, this brings me to the second poll question of the day. I think many people are aware that Chinese EPC contractors, especially, have quite a big influence in this region. So how many of the top 5 EPC contractors are Chinese? Now, just to clarify, this is in terms of projects that are currently under execution. Okay, so you have 4 options: 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is actually something that MEED.com reported on a little bit earlier this year. So we looked at the performance of Chinese EPC contractors in this sector in particular from February 2025 to February 2026. What we found was that of the 15 largest renewable energy projects that reached award last year, 9 of them went to Chinese EPC contractors, which really shows the influence they have in the region. So you've 1, 2, 3, or 4. And this leads nicely onto our next slide, which takes a look at the top contractors in the region. Okay, so top contractors under execution, as I already said. So India's Larsen and Toubro is the top EPC contractor in the region, according to contracts under execution, with $19.3 billion worth of contracts. In the top 5, so we have China's SEPCO 3, we have China Energy Engineering, and of course, we also have Power China. So anyone who said 3 in the top 5, you are correct. And I think what this shows is, especially for some of the mega scale projects in the region, I think these are increasingly on the EPC side of things becoming concentrated among the top very experienced EPC players in the industry. Obviously, if you go further down the list, we have Samsung, Korea, Samsung, C&T, Doosan Enerbility, El Saudi, we already mentioned, Technicus, Renewables, and Orascom. But I think if you look at the top 2, and then there's quite a significant fall after that. Good, we have someone here who has joined us from Turkey, and obviously Turkish contractors. Thank you for joining the webinar. I hope you get some value from this. Obviously, Turkish contractors are quite active right across the region. And we will move on. So let's take a look at some of the key drivers and risks. As I've already said, it's been quite a complex year, certainly a lot more to contend with. So if we're looking at the key drivers, rising electricity demand, economic diversification, and the energy transmission continue to drive investment across the MENA power sector. So I think one of the key drivers is the modernization of transmission networks. There'll be greater investment in grid infrastructure, so we see interconnectivity, and this will have to continue to improve to keep up with growing electricity capacity in the region. Artificial intelligence. So I think it's no surprise that this is going to be a big driver for electricity demand over the next few years. Certainly we've already seen in UAE, some large data center projects are underway. And in Saudi Arabia too, there is quite a big pipeline of data center projects coming up. Flexible gas-fired generation is another one. So obviously, as we continue with the energy transition, it's important that there is sufficient gas-fired generation to cope with the demand that is going to be put on the grid. I think in certain places like Iraq, for example, maybe parts of Egypt, I think gas-fired generation is seen as a cleaner substitute for oil and diesel, and this will definitely supply quite a significant number of the energy in these parts of the region. And that we'll take a look at the last poll question then today. What is the biggest challenge facing MENA power projects in 2026? Geopolitical tensions, rising project costs, supply chain disruptions, or all of the above? So obviously we've certainly had a lot more to contend with this year. But for those of you who are just joining us, okay, someone has just joined from Riyadh. Project activity is still doing quite well right across the board, right across all sectors, and it's quite consistent in terms of, as we looked at earlier, awards are quite consistent with this time last year. Question: what relevant projects are you seeing in the connectivity segment? So the GCCIA is certainly doing a lot of work in this field. So we have a big there's a big project coming up between Oman and UAE. There's also some more internet connectivity projects coming up. Kuwait, linking Kuwait to Iraq, for example. But I would say the projects that are under the GCCIA right now are the ones, and quite valuable projects too. So okay, we'll go to the next slide. Yeah, that's right. Syria is being interconnected too with Jordan, and I think this is quite important for an emerging industry in Syria too, which is basically rebuilding its electricity sector. There's some quite important electricity interconnection projects going on, and I think a tender for the Syria-Jordan interconnection link was released quite recently. So just to look at the market risks assessment, the MENA power sector, it does face a more complex risk environment in 2026 with the UAE's exit from OPEC, for starters, geopolitical tensions and rising electricity demand shaping energy demand and investment priority. So we just take a look at the table. Now, so we look at the current 2026 trajectory. By the end of 2025, it surged to 46 gigawatts of operational capacity, and a record number of gigawatts was added during the last quarter. Now we're also seeing a rapid, if you look at the second box below, we're seeing a rapid transition to solar, nuclear power, and green hydrogen. I think the thing to point out is, I think not a lot, in some ways, not a lot has changed. That this energy transition was taking place anyway, and I think even before the conflict, that there was certainly a push to diversify energy sources in the region. Perhaps now we will see this accelerated, but in that sense, I think this was a trend we were seeing already. So not a lot has necessarily changed. Region power sector investments are projected to jump from $40 billion to $60 billion annually by 2035. With transmission and distribution commanding nearly 40 to 50% of that total. And I guess one of the things that happened recently also was the UAE's exit from OPEC. So obviously, this gives the UAE much more control over their own oil production. I think one of the things we see is, I mean, once the influx of new Emirati crude comes onto the market, this potentially could drive down oil prices by $5 or $10 in the long term. And as a result, it could actually have a positive impact for utilities looking to import fuel at lower costs. But obviously, I think there certainly will be a lot of volatility moving forward. Geopolitical tensions, obviously the Strait of Hormuz has been the big one over the last few months. This will continue to threaten fuel supplies, project delivery, and equipment supply chains. I think for certain projects, maybe certain substation projects, there's certain supply equipment that it's a little bit more costly. And I think obviously this is a threat moving forward. Already said that utilities are accelerating investment in renewables, battery energy storage, and transmission networks to strengthen energy security and reduce fuel price exposure. I suppose one of the things to point out is, I will actually come onto it shortly, but nuclear energy is something that countries in the region might start to look at more closely. So as we said already, UAE is the only MENA country that has a commercial nuclear energy, but a plant is already being developed in Egypt, the Al Daba nuclear plant, and Saudi Arabia certainly has plans to, and a large pipeline of nuclear projects moving forward. And I think countries in the region might see nuclear projects as another form of energy security that would protect themselves against future shocks. Okay, and this leads me to the MEED Projects Awards 2026. So obviously this is something now we're in our 16th year. This is something that a flagship event that MEED hosts every single year. Submissions are currently open. I don't believe they'll be open for too much longer. So if you want to take part, I would suggest you get your submissions in now. I think the interesting thing probably about these awards is we tend to spend quite a lot of time looking at the pre-execution side of things, so contract awards, tenders, that kind of thing. Whereas an event like this actually looks at the deliverables. So it's a good opportunity to actually look at the project. Was the project delivered on time? And look at this in a bit more depth beyond the contract award stage. So this will be, I believe this will be in November again this year. And we encourage you to please take part, because I know there's been some tremendous projects that are in execution and have been completed in the last 12 months. So please contact MEED events at meed.com if you have more information on this. Now, that brings me to the last section of the webinar, future contracts analysis. It's always interesting to know what's coming up in the pipeline, and for stakeholders to know who they can target and how they can set their strategy. So future power projects, about $559 billion worth of power sector contracts are in the pre-execution stage in the MENA region, with solar projects accounting for 59% and Saudi Arabia accounting for over $201 billion of the total. About just over half of these projects in Saudi Arabia are in the bidding stage. So I guess this gives a good indicator of what might be coming in the near to medium term. I think if you look at that chart, it kind of just reinforces what we've said already, that solar and wind plants are going to continue to accelerate in the coming years. Nuclear energy, as I've just mentioned, has become quite important, and fossil fuels, conventional power plants, while certainly this has dropped fairly significantly in the last 18 months, it's still going to be a very necessary form of fuel over the next 5 years. Which leads me to the future power generation projects. We can see Saudi Arabia, no surprises, is top of the list in terms of the renewables pipeline. Interestingly, then we have Morocco in second, and Egypt and Algeria. I think a couple of things to point out here. Morocco and Algeria have quite a large renewables pipeline, but I think it's worth noting that a large percentage of these projects are still in the early FEED study stages. So we're looking kind of in the long term, and it remains to be seen how many of these progress over the next few years. Morocco has actually had quite limited contract awards so far in 2026. It's currently executing its Noor Atlas solar program, for which it awarded contracts for last year, but it also has renewable targets for 2030. So there is a big push to add renewable capacity, and quite rich actually in terms of resources for wind power projects. So I'm sure we will see plenty of these projects that will hit the market over the next couple of years. Algeria traditionally has been very reliant on combined cycle gas turbine plants. These kind of plants have accounted for quite a large chunk of its power generation. But it is also exploring avenues where it can diversify its energy sources over the next few years. I think one thing about the Algeria market, tendering has historically, certainly in terms of the gas-fired plants, it's taken quite a long time. It can sometimes be quite a slow process. So I think they have a little bit to prove on the execution side of things. So it remains to be seen how much of that 31 gigawatts will hit the market, but certainly both are trying to diversify their energy sources. Egypt has had one of the more active years in terms of contract awards, and certainly in terms of the battery energy storage system projects, which we will come on to now very shortly. Just to take a quick look at the future generation projects, the top clients in this market. So 4 of the top MENA future power generation clients are based in Saudi Arabia. So we've King Abdullah City for atomic and renewable energy. So we've this state-owned company is looking after Saudi Arabia's pipeline of nuclear power projects. So it has quite a significant pipeline of projects coming up. NOI looking after NEOM. And obviously we have seen a lot of projects scaled back in NEOM in the last 12 months. But there's still a significant pipeline of projects moving forward. Z-Links is working. This is actually one of the private developers on the list. So it's important to point out that that not all of these are state-owned government clients. Most of them are. Z-Links, for example, is working on subsea transmission projects between UK and Morocco. So it's just important to point out that not all of these, although most are government owned. We just have a comment here. Someone from the company called Global EPC located in Turkey. Okay, very good. Would be quite interested to know what projects you might be targeting this year, and I hope that some of this is of value. And again, just in the top 5, we have the Ministry of Electricity in Iraq. So a large pipeline of projects. Just a word of caution. I think there's a little history of promising a large chunk of new projects to come on stream. So I think it will be interesting to see how much of this is actually delivered over the next couple of years. And that takes me to selected unawarded projects. So this is a list of all projects that are currently out for tender. The next wave of contract awards will be driven by Saudi Arabia's renewable ambitions. So we are now into round 7 of the Saudi Arabia's National Renewable Energy Program, which is being procured by SPPC. And I would expect awards for round 7 to be made by the end of the year. So this is both solar powered projects and wind power. You can see some of them on the list. So we have the Mokak solar PV, 600 megawatts, the Talith solar PV project, 600 megawatts. 2, got a comment, so a small modular reactor type nuclear power plant is expected to hit the market in 3 to 4 years. Which plant are you talking about? Maybe you can put the location. I'd be quite interested to know which project you are talking about there. Obviously, the big one is Diwa, and the tendering for this is ongoing, and it's probably saw a little bit of a delay in bidding for this is the solar park phase 7 project. So I'm not quite sure if this will reach award by the end of the year or if it will push into 2027. Bahrain has a couple of quite interesting IWPP projects at the moment. So the Citra Independent Water and Power Plant bids were recently submitted for that. There are actually two bidders for this project. And I would expect a contract award to be made for that quite soon. Kuwait is another one that has some quite sizable projects in the project pipeline. So we already talked about the Al Zur phase 2 and phase 3 project. It has a couple of other quite big IWPPs coming up. The Al Khairan IWPP phase 1. Again, two bidders for this project. And I would expect an award to be made quite soon. I think some of these big projects we're seeing quite a trend of a relatively low number of bidders. And I think it's just a sign that of the sheer capital and investment it takes to develop these kind of large scales, especially the IWPP projects. These are quite valuable projects. And again, just to remind you, obviously there's a lot of information there. You can get the slides by clicking the link below this PowerPoint, and our team will send them out to you. Moving on. And just the last, actually, before I move on, the last thing I'll just mention is that a lot of the power generation projects are now being procured and continue to be procured using an IPP model. And this has become a very safe, successful model in this region. Which takes me to battery energy storage systems. SPECS comprises rechargeable batteries that can store and discharge energy from various sources when needed. It is one of the key solutions being considered to address the intermittency of renewable sources. I would also say it's without a doubt in the last 12 months, it's been one of the fastest growing segments for new projects in the region. It's obviously the more power that comes on stream in the next few years, BESS plays a critical role in handling that power. So just to look at some of the upcoming projects, the Adams Solar IPP project, which pre-qualification just opened for this about 2 weeks ago. This will include a BESS segment. I think details of this are still being finalized, but it's a 1 gigawatt solar IPP in Oman, and Oman are doing quite a lot of work on renewable energy projects. They also recently released a consultancy tender for a separate 1 gigawatt BESS project. So there's certainly some quite large scale BESS projects coming on stream in Oman. And just to stay on that, so it's first utility scale solar plant with battery storage, IBRI 3. This is also under construction now. It entered construction at the end of last year. So this was quite a big achievement for Oman too. I think if you look at the, let's just go to the SPPC BESS Group 2 projects. So interestingly, it was announced yesterday that 27 companies have been pre-qualified to participate in the tenders for these projects, up to almost 3 gigawatts in this second phase. And I think 27 companies, it just shows you the amount of interest that is in this segment now. And it's a very, very competitive segment. And that's something that's advancing now. Group 1 projects, we expect awards for these to be made later this year, but you can see that pipeline of best projects in Saudi Arabia. Elsewhere in Kuwait, the Kuwait government recently approved sites for up to 1.5 gigawatts of best projects in 2 separate cities. So they're looking for a piece of the action now too. So it's this is one of the most interesting segments for sure in the industry right now. Obviously, the landmark round-the-clock solar plus storage project in Abu Dhabi, we've already mentioned. Contract awards have also been made for 2 separate BESS projects in Egypt. And actually, if you look there, so on the right to the 1,000 megawatt hour BESS project. So this is another solar plant project with BESS based in MENA. And actually, just recently, the EPC contractor of Hassan Alam Construction and Sterling and Wilson was confirmed for this project. So as you can see, there's an awful lot happening. Another comment: SMR is at advanced staged in Darlington, USA. That's really interesting to hear. Obviously, it's good to learn of what is happening in other countries. And that brings me to almost the end of the presentation. I'll just take this last opportunity to mention the MENA Power Projects Market 2026, which will go into everything we've gone into today in much more depth. Power market projects, trends, full of data and analysis, and it will also go into each country that we've mentioned in much more depth and really break it down. And I do think it's a very valuable tool for anyone looking to expand their presence in the region, and also for anyone looking to target new contracts. And with that, is there any other questions? We have a couple of minutes to take some questions at the end of the webinar. I hope you've taken some value from this and found some of this data and information useful. There's certainly a lot of activity in the region. Also, you just remember that you can download the slides by clicking on the link below this video, and our team will be more than happy to give you a copy of the slides. Do we have any other questions? It's really great to see even people from USA, from Turkey, and it just goes to show that whilst we're covering the MENA region, it's really in terms of the stakeholders that take an interest in this region. That's not confined to just people in the MENA region. Thank you for taking the time out to join me. I'm more than happy to connect with any of you afterwards, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar, which I'm sure we will do in the not too distant future. And do we have any other questions before I finish? Okay, so with that, I will conclude today's webinar. Again, please feel free to reach out after this webinar, and I'm more than happy to discuss any of the topics that we have touched on today. Okay, thank you. Have a good day.